Hey vlog, this is not necessarily the normal vlog I would do, but I just wanted to do a quick chat. I realized I never really introduced myself on this platform. There's plenty of videos on TikTok, but I've never really shared what I actually do. I am a full-time graduate student studying fisheries science at Oregon State University. I specifically study the impacts of climate change on the early life history stages of a few different grouper species found in the Cayman Islands. I specifically study the aggregation site in the Cayman Islands, but these species exist throughout the Caribbean and Western Atlantic Ocean. Yeah, I study the impacts of climate change on these species during early life history stages. So literally when they are like fertilized eggs going up to like 6, maybe 7 days old. I'll put pictures and things in here so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm a scientist that literally does research on fish. I specifically look at the impacts of climate change on different fisheries, and for my master's work, I focus on Nassau grouper, which is this really cool fish that's right there. It's my favorite fish, and I look at how climate change impacts it at early life history stages, which means I look at them when they're super young, like literally just fertilized eggs and larvae. So we go out on spawning nights when the fish are actually spawning, and we'll collect fertilized eggs. So many eggs are produced during this time that what we collect doesn't make a difference. A bunch of divers will go out and do this around the same time, and we'll collect a bunch of fertilized eggs that we'll later bring back to a lab and rear them, like literally raise them on our own at different temperatures to see how climate change is really impacting them. Once the experiments are done, we bring them back to another lab, which is where I'm actually based once I leave the islands. And here it's a lot more technical work, a lot more lab work, where I'm seeing how very specific things are changing for the larvae, seeing how like length, energy reserves, body size, etc. are changing at different temperatures. I have like a love-hate relationship with lab work. It may not be for everyone, but I'm doing it. Another thing I look at though involves genetics. I'm looking to see how gene expression of certain proteins are changing for different larvae reared at different temperatures. This part is really not my favorite. I don't think I'll become a geneticist, but it's really cool to see like how things turned out. Like, it's still interesting to see what the science shows. And then every couple months I get to present my research at conferences. I'm also constantly working on manuscripts and writing and publishing updates and whatnot for this work. My master's is pretty much focused on grouper, but I work on other like internships and side projects that look at impacts of climate change on other species and other places. And this is just my path. Not every marine biologist ends up like me. People study so many different things out there. The ocean's a huge place. There's lots of different things to look into. And then I've done different work but still in the same category with eDNA, looking at how effective eDNA can be used for determining where these spawning aggregations are. I guess I never really described what a spawning aggregation is, but it's basically a place where fish will meet up to reproduce, to spawn, mass spawn. So it'll be literally thousands of fish in the water, males releasing their gametes, females releasing their gametes, those gametes combine, and that's how you get a fertilized egg externally. And so that happens with literally thousands of fish, and a fish can produce thousands to millions of gametes at a time. So it's a lot that happens on these nights and these spawning aggregations, right? If they're at a healthy size. So yeah, study those. Another thing I do is look at energy output of these gametes, specifically the eggs that the females are released, to see how energy output changes with different aggregation sizes, or if there are climate impacts on the aggregation size, or larvae, how that impacts energy output as well. That's a whole another side project I have. I'm famous for taking on side projects because I have a hard time saying no, which I don't recommend doing. I recommend learning how to say no and really focusing on, you know, what you're supposed to be focusing on. Oh, another project I work on is really just describing the early life history stages of a species called yellowfin grouper. So I studied 3 different types of grouper: tiger grouper, Nassau grouper, which is like the big one, Nassau, and then yellowfin grouper. Yellowfin grouper is the complicated one because technically it hasn't been studied at its early life history stages formally. So there's no publications out there really describing its early life history stages. And that is where I'm coming in. I guess my master's work is really describing those stages for yellowfin groupers so I can continue to do the work I've been doing already, my PhD, and in the future for the rest of the grouper species I'm studying, and including yellowfin in those studies. Hey guys, I needed to pause because as I'm editing, I realized I never really explained one major key thing that happened throughout my graduate work. So I originally came in as a master's student doing all of the things that was explained in that TikTok that I stitched in earlier. But probably like 2 to 3 years in, I realized how much work it actually was. And so did my PI, and so did my committee members. And we decided that it was more appropriate for this to be a PhD project and not necessarily a master's project. So that's how I kind of went from that term of just being a master's student to just being a full out grad student, because I slowly transitioned into doing both. So my master's work is really just a portion of the overall PhD work I need to do. And so this last part I just explained is actually my master's thesis work. And everything else from that video, plus a few other projects that I had described, are going all into the work of my PhD. Hope that makes sense. I said I'm a grad student, which is great, but also not. At the same time, I love it because I do enjoy, like, I am a very curious person and I do enjoy like taking on all these projects and doing different things, but I hate being a student sometimes. Like, I hate going to classes and, signing up for credits and having to participate in different student organizations and do different things. I have a hard time saying no, so I oftentimes put way too much on myself, and it just gets really hard to complete and finish certain things. But then also, it's important to do the extra stuff just to get more experience, to network, etc. So it's all important. It's just not my favorite part of being a student. Okay, my SD card was full and my camera stopped recording, so I just switched to my phone camera until I can offload that SD card and get some more space. Yeah, studied a bunch of different things. School can be hard at times. Being a student can be hard at times, especially when you're a person like me that just takes on way too many things. Most of my work, no, not most, all of my work is grant funded, so I'm also heavily reliant and dependent on always applying for different things and making sure that continues long term and sustainable. So when I first started grad school, I started under a NOAA fellowship called Living Marine Resource Cooperative Science Center. It's a network of like 5 different schools, I believe, that will fund students for grad school, either a master's or a PhD, to do their work domestically in the US. So that was my first funding source. Then my second, I applied for while I was in school, the NSF GRFP, the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship, which funded the next 3 years of my experience. And I'm actually currently on that last year of funding. And in the midst of all that time, I came in as a master's student, but in the midst of that time, I realized how big my project actually was. And so had transitioned into more of a PhD. Not bypassing my master's, I'll still get the master's, but also continuing into a PhD through that process. So it's crazy to think it's 2025 already. I started grad school in 2020. Doing this for 5 years, and I probably still have a couple more years left in me. But that's like a byproduct of coming in for 2 different degrees and then having a project that's heavily dependent on a species that spawns on a very specific time of year, only once a year. So I can only do so much field work at a time, literally only once a year. And my first year, it was COVID, so I couldn't travel and got nothing. Second year, they didn't spawn the first month that I went down. Thankfully, we got something the second month. And my third year is when I feel like I finally did a complete good year of data collection. So that definitely took some time. Oh, my SD card uploaded. Let's hop back to my camera. Yeah. All right, she's back. Outside of grad school, I realized I have a strong passion for science communication in various ways when it comes to science communication with policy and policymakers. Also, science communication to the general public and making sure that people are generally informed about what's going on, especially about the natural resources that are useful to them, like grouper. I studied grouper in the Cayman Islands, which is a critical species in various places, but definitely a critical species in the Cayman Islands, ecologically, economically, culturally. It's such an important species. And so a lot of the work I do, I really want it to align with the goals and wants of the communities that live in every place. I, in the past, worked on a project with different fisheries in the California current, doing species distribution modeling to see where fish will be over the next 50 to 80 years. The work I'm doing right now involves species distribution modeling for climate vulnerable fish species, specifically ground fishes found along the west coast of the United States, which basically means I'm just looking to see where fish would be in the next 50 to 100 years under various climate change scenarios. It's a lot of modeling work, a lot of computer work, a lot of art in my studio, which is why I feel like I've been stressed so much this summer because I'd rather be outside half the time. Which was also a really rewarding project because I was doing it with groundfish species, which is once again a super important species to the communities of the California current. I live in Oregon, I live in Portland. A lot of the fish we eat are rockfish. So once again, very important throughout Washington, Oregon, and California. Also, even going up to Alaska, some of these species are super important. I think that's where my true passion aligns, is like making sure we're aligned with the communities that need this type of work, right? And so the best way I see that we can do that is through science communication. And while I don't formally study science communication, I found fun ways to involve it in my life. And one way is through things like this, social media. I started posting in 2020 on TikTok, and like that really kind of drove or inspired a lot of my interest for sure. And then I did a couple of different things. I started working with a nonprofit called Black and Marine Science and currently do a lot of their social media work as well. I became a Spark Fellow for the Consortium of Aquatic Science Societies. It's basically a fellowship where early career professionals can get training on science communication in a variety of different ways, specifically for policymakers and policy. So that was really exciting to be a part of, or is really exciting to be a part of. Another thing I got to do recently was become the science communication intern for ASLO, the Association for the Sciences of Limnology and Oceanography. So getting to pursue more of my SciComm interest in that aspect, various different ways. And also on my project, like I'm always volunteering to do different things, whether it's helping write a blog post or even getting featured in the We Speak Fish. It is a cool YouTube series used for educational purposes about the spawning aggregations in Cayman Islands. That's how I incorporate that into my life. So the big two things about me for sure are the marine science component, being the student, being the scientist, being the interested, curious researcher. And then the second big thing about me is the communication side, explaining that science, talking to people about that science, helping people understand what's going on. The third big thing about me is travel and doing new experiences. And if you've been on this page, you know I love to travel to many different places. I've traveled to over 30 countries at this point, and a lot of that is accredited to being involved in marine science. I've done internships in places like French Polynesia, and I got to spend an entire summer in Moorea at one point, getting scuba certified, working on a research project. Studied marine macroalgae on that project. Worked in San Diego, California, studying sea turtles. I did another project in Washington, D.C., more behind a desk working on a marine mammal report. All these different internship type of experiences that allowed me to travel. But then once I realized how much I was traveling, and not even just for internships, but also conferences, I went to Puerto Rico, I've been to Hawaii, I've been to Spain on a scientific conference. I was like, yeah, I love to travel. I love to do these different things. I would love to keep traveling, even for personal reasons. That really started actually back when I was in high school because my godmother, my aunt, really, she was the study abroad advisor for the school that she taught at. She was a high school teacher and she invited me to come on one of her trips when I turned 15, I think. We went to Spain. I loved it. And like, I think since then, I was always like, whatever I do, I want to travel. And I definitely did that. Clearly through marine science, but also through various other ways. I started a travel podcast with my best friend called Melanin and Miles. And I go deeper into my travel story on that podcast. I need to get more active on that podcast. But yeah, that is one way I've been more involved in the travel world. I studied abroad in undergrad as well. I actually studied abroad in Spain and I just did a lot of like Europe travel. And that's where I met one of my current best friends as well. And we became travel partners and are always doing fun different trips together. And when I do go places for marine science, oftentimes I just randomly pick another destination based off of like if flight's getting paid for. Instead of returning home, I just return to a whole new place. So that is another common way that I have gotten around to many different places in the world. So those are the three major aspects of my life when it comes to like and personal interests. However, okay, my camera died, so we're back here on my phone. Those are the main interests I have both professionally and personally. I'm just super excited to keep growing and going on this journey. I'm so happy that I have you guys, I have my community online that has helped me and inspired me to continue going in this journey. Because let me tell you, I get tired. Sometimes I just want to like completely say, forget school. It's time to, just do something else full time. I'm getting out of that mindset, but I'm growing and I'm happy with that. And I'm happy I can, share my story and hopefully inspire others to pursue marine science as well. Now, this is just my journey specifically. Oh, one thing I never got into. In high school, I had no idea careers like this existed. I did not know I wanted to be a marine scientist. Didn't know it was possible until I had got to college. I studied marine and environmental science. You know what I'm gonna do? I will insert some clips of me talking about how I got here in the first place. Because in high school, I did not know I wanted to do this. I didn't even know this was like a real job. I was good at science, so I thought, I'd be like a medical doctor or something, but like I didn't know this was the path for me. I also grew up in like a rural part of Pennsylvania. I was like hours away from the closest beach. So you don't also have to grow up like near the water or anything to do this type of work. Okay, I tried finding old TikToks that like fully explained how I got here. I got lazy after scrolling through like 100 videos. But yeah, already explained my high school experience. Then I went to school at Hampton University to study biology on a pre-med track. Realized I didn't like that, and I took a couple electives and spoke with people in the marine and environmental science department at our school. And that's when I officially decided I wanted to change my major. So once I changed that, I was exposed to like way more experiences through internships and just different things. And I actually got to present some of that research at a conference, which is where I actually met my current PI or my boss at Oregon State University at that conference. And we ended up finding funding for my research, and I ended up going to Oregon State to continue my work in the sciences, more specifically fishery science, rather than like the broader marine and environmental science I was in before. Do not feel pressure to know anything about marine science in high school. It can take time. Everyone has their own story, everyone has their own experience. Do not feel like you need to copy paste my life. Your path is your path. You will get there when you need to get there or how you need to get there. everyone has a different story. So while I hope my page is inspiration and does encourage you to pursue the field and stick with it, do not look at it as a template. Do not look at this account or page as a template of everything to follow. Yeah, that is this video. I'm excited to answer some more questions in the next video. I think I'll do an FAQs video next week or something similar. We'll see. Subscribe, keep me motivated. I can't wait to just show more of the Royal Marine Science. And I'm leaving for fieldwork actually pretty soon, within the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for a fieldwork vlog coming soon.